An enormous cargo ship is currently blocking 10% of the world's trade in the Suez Canal. The 400-meter-long and 59 meters wide Ever Given container ship ran aground early on March 23 as it traveled north from the Red Sea towards the Mediterranean, twisting diagonally across the width of the canal. As a consequence, the traffic on the crucial waterway linking the Mediterranean and the Red Sea has been at a standstill for 2 days after the MV Ever Given ran aground in high winds. And at least 250 other vessels needing to pass through the crucial waterway are sitting idle. Efforts to refloat the ship have failed so far, and the waterway could remain blocked for weeks. This will have a major knock-on effect on global shipping and trade. Egypt's Suez Canal Authority, SCA, said it was temporarily suspending navigation through one of the world's busiest shipping lanes until the grounded container vessel MV Ever Given is refloated. The announcement on Thursday came after low tide overnight slowed efforts to dislodge the massive vessel that has chocked traffic in both directions along the canal and created one of the worst shipping jams seen in years. This is an enormous vessel. It is one of the biggest in the world. It is 400 meters long. The Suez Canal is 200 meters wide. There are 20,000 containers on board. Every day, 50 vessels on average go through that canal, so the closing of the canal means no vessels are transiting north and south. Every day the canal is closed, container ships and tankers are not delivering food, fuel, and manufactured goods to Europe, and goods are not being exported from Europe to the Far East. Those containers are full of the chips needed to make cars. There are now, according to Lloyd's List, 250 vessels waiting to go through the Suez Canal, and they really are stuck. The Suez Canal is one of the world's most important shipping lanes, with 12% of global trade and 8% of liquefied natural gas traverse the canal and nearly 2 million oil barrels each day. Every day the canal is blocked, it halts about $9.6 billion of trade. The number of ships loaded with billions of dollars worth of goods waiting to traverse the canal has risen to more than 300, according to Bloomberg data. The ship weighs 200,000 tons, twice as much as a U.S. aircraft carrier. It's designed not to ever touch anything but water. It's not going anywhere soon. They will have to build a crane and a road, and a terminal and get about 500 trucks to move the containers off of it. That would take a month if they started yesterday, which they probably didn't. Then when it is empty, they might be able to move it, or they may have to cut it up. That will be another month. Any ships waiting better divert right now. The container ship is registered in Panama, operated by a Taiwanese company, owned by a Japanese company. All the crew is from India and it was traveling from China to the Netherlands, passing through Egypt, and the driver was a woman. I'm sure there is a pun in there somewhere. Strange how such an innocuous-looking accident can supposedly bring the world to its knees. Basically, the question is, who is in control? Who is calling the shots? The world is so interdependent in trade. This is what happens when production is sent overseas, and everything must get transported 10,000 miles. It also keeps everyone's borders fully open to the next pandemic and creates a race to the bottom for wages. Globalization and cheap labor have consequences. Maybe this whole "let me get third world people to make stuff for me" idea isn't that great after all. Globalization has destroyed middle-class societies around the globe while the rich profit mightily. This shows how venerable our world trading system is. Imagine if someone wanted to sabotage the world by getting 1 or 2 ships stuck there, and the same in the Panama Canal. This could delay shipments to the US of everything from food to electronics and spike gas prices. At a time that the shipping industry is stressed, something as unprecedented as this takes place. This strains credulity. Buy rice and beans, bad things are afoot. The whole thing and timing of it stink. But hey, if it brings back more domestic production, the pain is probably worth it. If only we realized that 70% of the BS in our lives is superfluous and unnecessary. That we have focused way too much on building bank accounts instead of on building families. So, no, old wood, chump, and domestic production is not the answer to our problems. The problems we face are a lack of morals, principles, and character, and not financial or economic. This is the root of the problem. Welcome back to the Atlantis Report. You are here for your daily dose of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please take a second to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to also hit the notification bell. The largest ship in the world blown sideways by the wind. A 150-year-old canal, and nobody had a plan to float ships that get stuck. Was this a black swan event? Or something else done on purpose? What are the chances of the Panama Canal having a similar incident shortly? I am wondering if these psychopaths are intentionally shutting down the supply to stoke hyperinflation. More shortages will raise prices and increase demand. Are they pushing for price controls and rationing? Nothing is a coincidence. The price of oil needed this. The projected supply chain breakdowns, inventory shortages, large economic instability expected in late Q2 2021. This is to kick off the supply chain breakdowns. Here are some actual pertinent points that mainstream media did not take the time to look up. The tidal charts show they have until at most Wednesday to float this. After that, there is a 30 centimeters drop in the average tidal height. The tugs the last few days appeared to be doing nothing other than providing stability. The reason they are providing stability is they are clearly rushing to drain fuel and ballasts before the tide levels lessen. This is the most dangerous phase because the ship will be very top-heavy with its seek and load, and spring desert winds can present dangers. Offloading sea cans for less weight is near futile. They'd require a massive barge-based crane that can take heavy loads. The Capo G tug may be close to having it out, or out tonight when the tide peaks in 6 hours at 9 p.m. tonight. At 2,200 tons and pulling from the back where the fulcrum leverage is the highest, it appears the angle of the ship is shifted slightly. However, using the lookup charts for the tugs themselves, no matter how large they are, their charts only go to 300 tons. The wind shear calculations are insane. With an estimated 30 mpg wind gusts coming in a near right angle against the 400,000 square feet of estimated surface area, it has the potential to experience up to 800 tons of wind shear force. This is reduced by the angles being slightly off. This aids the Cap G. My unbiased analysis expects this. The shear force loads up to 800 tons from gusts. This weekend will aid the Cap G, who is finally pulling from a high leverage fulcrum angle right now. With a high tide at 9 p.m. tonight, they may get it out. If they cannot get it out this weekend with that much wind shear assisting, they will most likely never get it out until serious sand dredgers can get in. The question is, how do the sand dredgers reach 40 meters under the vessel in order to suck that sand out? It has a beam width of a massive 250. If it's not out this weekend, it will not be out until they get in something the size of an aircraft carrier to rip it out, or will not be out for up to 2 to 3 months for dredging. One tank, crane, bulldozer has the pulling power of 100 tons, D9 pulls 175 tons. They can consider lining up 100 tanks tied to the back, pulling from the land. That would give them 10,000 tons of pull force from the land, but they would need miles of 2 inches steel cable as each cable's minimum break is approximately 160 tons. However, a ship's anchor chain from a 100,000-ton vessel can withstand 1,000 tons easily and is the only thing that can handle that force. Grant you need dozens of 2 inches steel cable loops tied to the back of it, or some way to crane the anchor onto the back of the ship itself. This is all probably a mute plan as the engineering charts of her bollards at her back will break off long before those tensions are reached. The only real option is to bring in boring directional equipment that can run dozens of hollow tubes under the ship and then pump high-pressure water that will liquefy the sand underneath the ship so the dredge suctions can pump it out. On a liquefied blanket of sand, it will lose friction and move. Aided with a very large vessel 50,000 tons or higher. The tugs on the front are probably not assisting much as they are pulling the bow of the ship against the 30-foot wall of sand it is buried into. All kinds of fun and specialty equipment can probably be brought in underwater excavator at 30 tons a scoopot to probably eventually dig this out. I'm calling 2 months of disruption in trade, supply chain interruption. It might be cheaper and quicker to just dig a new canal. My dad always said to me as a kid, a huge ship just doesn't get stuck for no reason. Never let a good crisis go to waste. Hike the price of oil. It's the basic economy. Less supplies equal a more expensive price. And this is why the Chinese are keen on the Belt and Road Initiative. Just like the sanctions against Russia forced it to become self-sufficient, this will add impetus to China's effort with the Belt and Road Initiative. This should be marked down as yet another tactical victory that will turn out to be a strategic defeat, something they excel at. It's funny how their strangle attempts are backfiring by forcing them to become completely independent of the globalist system, which then produced an alternative for the world. Globalism has created a Mr. Magoo world. We always seem to be one wrong step away from disaster, and nobody even is aware of it. Those that are aware of our global fragility keep their mouths shut in the interest of keeping the gravy train rolling. It doesn't matter if the Fed can print faster than the disasters. Now we have a double mutant strain of COVIDs in India, third wave lockdowns coming worldwide. They are going to hit the reset button and evaporate all the paper wealth. Fed buying tips, fake problems, so people stash cash to spend it later, the fiscal stimulus plan, etc. Establishment really means inflation this time to inflate the debt away. There is one problem though, the bond market already knows it and has a plan of its own. Disruption of supplies and logistics creates shortages. The military introduced into cities. The lockdowns exacerbate societal degradation. As policing is overwhelmed by hordes of young disenfranchised youths, robbed of the promise of better tomorrow. The blatant display of those in the power of position and ensuing injustices make people revolt. You see replication in the streets of London, Belgium, Germany, France. Unheard of many years ago. Coming to cities across the world. This will be a year to remember. If you are still in a city, and you have the means to leave, get out. Global trade dependency is the biggest threat to national sovereignty on Earth and the biggest polluter. So why are all of the so-called benevolent, green pushers not addressing this issue? Because the green movement is about money and control. The just-in-time supply chains always have, and very obviously, been a major risk factor to the world's economy. The assumptions always made were that things just always work in the context of ships, planes, and intervening suppliers, which is a seriously stupid assumption to make. Every time I talked to a so-called supply chain risk analyst, they would always claim they had multiple vendors in their bullpen. Nothing can go wrong. But the vendors were always over in China and always used the exact same supply chain transportation. One typhoon negates that risk strategy. But something bigger and global wipes out the company. These standards risk strategies are high risk because you have low resistance to risk to not have true probabilistically independent redundancy. I would call it fragile, as opposed to a more diverse strategy of suppliers, which would be anti-fragile. You know, like have some US vendors even if they are more expensive because it gives a portfolio risk reduction. Basically, supply chain risk analysts have primarily been petty bureaucrats suffering from Dunning-Kruger, knowing the words but not understanding what they meant. I'm not surprised by stuff like this, nor particularly effects, because what's happening today with supply chains is exactly what I saw coming 20 years ago. This is exactly the risk of rolling up snake eyes when the common wisdom was to bet that low risk, pass lines aligned to bureaucratic sensibilities. This has all been very much a "I told you so" moment after years of being a Cassandra. At this point, I really no longer care, I've prepped, and too bad for everyone else.